They told me Christmas was complicated this year. That was the word my daughter chose. Like a ribbon tied tight around the truth. Complicated. As if love gets seasonal hours. As if a mother becomes optional when the tablecloth is white and the guests are rich. I was 74 with hands that had balanced other people's futures for most of my adult life. Retirement, they said, was supposed to be soft. Slow mornings, crossword puzzles, cinnamon tea, the kind of quiet you earn. But that December, quiet didn't feel like peace. It felt like being left out of the room on purpose. It started the way most betrayals do now, through a screen and a smile. A cheery little group chat message with too many exclamation points, too much sparkle, too much pretending. Mom, Christmas brunch at the Montgomery's Club is going to be so formal. Like, black tie-ish. I don't want you to feel uncomfortable. We can do something cozy here another day. Love you. Love you. 2 words used like a bandage slapped over a cut they caused. I read it once. Then again. Then I stared at the blinking cursor. Like it might confess what she wouldn't say out loud. Uncomfortable. Formal. Cozy. Another day. And, underneath it all, the sentence she couldn't quite bring herself to type. The one I could hear anyway. Because I had known her voice since it was only a cry in a hospital room. You will embarrass me. Outside, my neighborhood had already dressed itself for the holidays. Wreaths on doors. Icicle lights dangling like frozen laughter. The air smelled like wood smoke and exhaust. Somewhere down the block a radio played old carols that always made me think of my late husband, Sam, humming off-key while he wrapped gifts too neatly, like wrapping was a promise. I walked into my kitchen and looked at the bowl of oranges on the counter, the same kind I used to stud with cloves when my daughter was little. She used to love that smell. She'd press her nose to the fruit and grin like she'd discovered magic. Now she was telling me Christmas was too polished. For me, I didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt. It did. It hit low, below the ribs, where a mother stores the first footprints of her child. It hit in the place where I kept every mom. Look, and every mom, I need you. But I didn't cry because grief, when you've lived long enough, eventually changes into something else. It becomes clarity. You stop reaching for what keeps slapping your hand away. You stop begging for a seat at tables you helped build. You stop pretending you don't understand the language of dismissal just because it's spoken. Softly, my daughter Chloe was 13 and engaged to a man whose last name opened doors like a master key. Leah Montgomery. The Montgomerys weren't just wealthy. They were polished wealth. The kind that smells like old leather and imported candles. The kind that speaks with its chin slightly lifted. When I first met Liam's mother, Cecilia, she greeted me with a smile so thin it looked painted on. We stood in the foyer of their home, their estate where the air was colder than outside, as if the house itself practiced being impressed. Chloe had squeezed my hand, nervous and shining, and said something about her father's hardware stores, like it was a sweet family detail, like it mattered. Cecilia's eyes flicked over me the way people glance at a price tag they already know they won't pay. Oh, she said, how practical. Practical. The word landed like a paper cut small, precise, stinging longer than it should. And I watched my daughter's face change. Not angry, not even sad, just embarrassed, like my existence had suddenly become a stain on her outfit. That look stayed with me. It moved into the wedding planning like a shadow that didn't leave. When the sun did, Chloe wanted a winter wonderland wedding. She said it with stars in her eyes, like she'd invented snow, ice sculptures, a string quartet, velvet table runners, crystal chandeliers rented for a single night, a champagne wall, real pine trees trucked in and flocked to look like a fairy tale had exploded. And every time she said, "It's non-negotiable," I heard another sound underneath, a shovel, digging into the savings Sam and I had built for decades. The money we called security. The money that once meant a small cabin by a creek, 10 acres of quiet we sold so she could get her MBA and never need to ask anyone for anything. We sold our peace so she could buy her future. Now she was spending it to buy approval. And I let it happen. At first, because a mother's love is a dangerous currency. It makes you sign checks you shouldn't. It makes you ignore the part of yourself that used to protect you. For 40 years I was a financial advisor. I sat across from men who thought they were untouchable and women who apologized for asking about their own money. I read contracts like other people read bedtime stories. I knew what risk looked like before it happened. I could smell a bad investment the way some women smell smoke. But when it came to my child, the mother in me kept taking the wheel. Until Christmas, until she uninvited me from a day meant to honor Family because her new rich in-laws needed the illusion of a perfect lineage more than they needed my real heart. That's what broke it. Not the expensive dress she bought with my money. Not the way Liam spoke to me like I was a neighbor who'd wandered in. Not even Cecilia's little comments about taste and standards and how certain people carry themselves. No. It was the way my own daughter scheduled my loneliness like a harmless activity. We'll do something cozy another day. As if I were a chore you postpone. As if you can move a mother to the side of the calendar like a dentist appointment. That night, I sat by my living room window and watched snow begin to fall, thin and hesitant, like even the sky didn't feel safe committing to tenderness. The Christmas tree in the corner glowed soft. I'd decorated it alone, slow and quiet, the way you do when you're trying not to admit you're talking to ghosts. The ornaments were old, some were chipped. One tiny angel had lost a wing years ago, but I kept hanging it anyway because life is like that, still beautiful. Even when it's missing something. I looked at the gifts beneath the tree. I'd bought Chloe a silver bracelet she once pointed at in a shop window, years ago, back when she still pointed at things with me beside her, not behind her. I'd bought Liam a leather wallet because Sam always said a man should carry his money properly. I'd bought Cecilia nothing. I didn't know what you give a woman who thinks she's already above receiving. And then, very calmly, I walked into my home office. It wasn't fancy, just a desk, a lamp, and shelves lined with binders from my working life, quiet proof that I had once been the person people called when they needed stability. I pulled out the folder marked Wedding Fund. Chloe's fund wasn't a fairy tale chest. It was a joint account, created years ago, a planned gift, a structured gift, a gift with safeguards, because I don't come from people who throw money into the wind and hope it turns into happiness. There it was, in the paperwork, simple, clean, black and white like winter branches, withdrawals over $500 require both signatures. Dual authorization. 2 keys. Chloe had gotten comfortable taking little bites from it, deposits here, a fitting fee there, all under the threshold. A slow, careless confidence that the vault belonged to her just because she had a dream and a fiancé with a famous last name. She forgot who built the vault, she forgot who held the other key. And then I did something that surprised even me. I made tea. Not a frantic cup, not a trembling cup, a slow cup, the kind you make when you've decided something and your body is catching up to your mind. I sat at my kitchen table with the steam rising in soft curls, and I thought about Sam. I could see him at the hardware store counter, sleeves rolled up, laughing with customers like they were family. I could see him handing me the keys to our first little home, saying, "Bren, we did it." I could see his hands, when he got sick, still strong. Even when the rest of him was tired, he used to tell me, "You're the one who makes the numbers behave." And I whispered into the quiet, "I'm still here." Christmas morning arrived bright and bitter, the kind of cold that makes your lungs feel like glass. Chloe stopped by 4 or 5 minutes. 5 like I was a neighbor. She was being polite too. She wore a designer coat that could have paid a month's rent in my old apartment. She handed me carnations in cheap plastic wrap, the kind you grab when guilt is running late. "Happy Christmas, Mom," she said too brightly. "We're rushing, we'll call you later." She leaned in for a hug that lasted exactly long enough to keep the story clean. I held her an extra second, just one, not to cling, not to beg. To notice her perfume, expensive, the silk lining of her coat, smooth. The way she pulled back like she was already stepping into another world. Then she was gone, and my house filled with the kind of silence that doesn't soothe, the kind that judges. I didn't spend that day in sorrow. I spent it in preparation. On Monday at 9 a.m., I walked into my bank wearing the navy suit I used to wear when clients tried to bluff me. I didn't go to the teller. I went to the branch manager, Robert, a man I had known for years. A man who still spoke to me like I was a person, not a category. "Brenda," he said, smiling, "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas," I replied, and it wasn't even a lie. "Not anymore. I need to place an administrative freeze on a joint account," I said. The smile left his face slowly, replaced by the serious calm that money demands. We sat behind glass, the world muffled outside, and I handed him the documents with my signature line already circled in my mind. He looked at the clause. He looked at my name. "You understand what this will do," he said. "I understand exactly what this will do," I answered, and when the pen touched paper, my hand didn't shake. I signed, and it felt like locking a door I had been holding open for years, while someone kept walking through and tracking mud across my heart. By Monday afternoon, the calls began. Not from my daughter at first, no. Pride always tries to bargain before panic. The wedding planner called her. The venue called the planner. The caterer called the venue. Then the florist. Then the band. A chain reaction of consequences, snapping tight like Christmas lights, suddenly plugged into truth. Checks bounced. Deposits failed. Payments couldn't be processed. And Chloe, my glamorous, busy, important daughter, finally called me with a voice I hadn't heard since she was 16 and got caught in a lie. "Mom," she said, sharp and breathless. "What did you do?" "The account is frozen." I let it go to voicemail. Not because I wanted to be cruel. Because for the first time in years, I wanted her to feel what I felt. The helplessness. The sudden realization that someone else controls the room you thought you owned. She called again. And again. Liam called once, too. His voice was tight, forced polite. "Brenda, we need to fix this immediately." Fix this. Like I was a machine that malfunctioned. Like I was the help. On Tuesday, they showed up at my house. No warning. No apology. Just entitlement with perfume on it. Chloe burst in first. Eyes wild. Cheeks flushed like humiliation had finally found her. "Are you insane?" she snapped. "You're ruining my wedding." Liam hovered behind her, jaw clenched, trying to look powerful in my small living room the way men do when they're used to being powerful everywhere else. "This is unacceptable," he said. "That money is for our wedding." I stood up slowly, because some moments deserve to be met on your feet. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. The beautiful face I used to kiss goodnight. The eyes that once searched mine for comfort. Now they were searching for access. "I wasn't invited to Christmas brunch," I said softly. Chloe blinked, as if she couldn't understand why that mattered more than chandeliers. "That's not the point," she said, frustrated. "Mom, you're making this about you." And that's when something inside me, something old and tired and finally finished, just settled. "Yes," I said, "I am." The words didn't come out angry. They came out clear. "I am making this about me because you made it about them," I continued, and my voice felt like winter cold enough to keep a wound from bleeding, sharp enough to make you pay attention. "You decided your mother was an embarrassment. You decided I was not the kind of woman who fits into your new picture." Liam tried to interrupt, but I raised one hand, and he stopped. He actually stopped. Because there are certain tones a woman earns after 7 decades. You don't get to argue with them easily. "That money," I said, "was not a birthright. It was a gift. A gift made out of love and memory and sacrifice. And gifts require respect." Chloe's mouth opened. Closed. I could see her trying to find the version of me that always softened. The one that always took the blame. Always said, "It's okay, baby." But that version of me had been left outside a country club door. I froze the account. I said, "Yes, because if I'm not good enough to sit beside you at brunch, then you are not entitled to spend the rest of my life savings to impress people who wouldn't hold the door for me." Chloe's face crumpled, anger, panic, shame, all fighting for the same space. Liam's voice dropped into that quiet threat men use when they think fear will do what love won't. "You can't do this," he said. "My family, I don't care about your family's opinions," I cut in. "I care about my daughter's character. And right now, I don't recognize it." The room went silent. Even the heating vents sounded loud. Finally, Chloe whispered, "What do you want?" There it was. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I didn't realize." Not, "Mom, please forgive me." What do you want? A negotiation, a transaction. And maybe that's what she'd become. Or maybe that's what she thought she had to be to survive around people like Cecilia. I took a breath. I looked past them at my Christmas tree, still glowing in the corner like it was stubbornly refusing to stop believing in warmth. "I want a smaller wedding," I said. "A real wedding, not a performance." Chloe's eyes widened, horrified, like I'd asked her to marry in a parking lot. "And," I continued, "I want control. Budgets, approvals. No more non-negotiable expenses. If you want my help, you will respect my boundaries." Liam swallowed hard. He hated this part, the part where he wasn't the buyer and I wasn't the product. "And," I added gently, almost kindly, "I want to protect myself. 50% of what remains goes into a trust for my own care. Irrevocable. Untouchable." Chloe made a small sound, like the air had left her. "That's not fair," she whispered. I smiled, not happy, not cruel. Just, knowing. "Neither was uninviting your mother from Christmas," I said. They agreed. Of course they did. Because the truth is, when the money stops, people suddenly remember how to be polite. The wedding changed after that. It shrank. It softened. It became less glitter and more gravity. The day it finally happened, snow fell in slow, quiet flakes. like the sky was blessing the earth without making a show of it. The venue was smaller. The flowers were still beautiful, but not theatrical. The music was still lovely, but not bought to impress strangers. And my daughter looked older in a way that wasn't about age. She looked like she'd learned something she couldn't unlearn. At the reception, I watched her glance at me more than once. Not with embarrassment this time, but with a strange uncertainty, like she was finally seeing the full outline of who I was beyond mom. When the final invoices came, I made her stand beside me as I reviewed them, not to humiliate her, to teach her, to show her what it looks like when a woman handles her life with dignity. And later that night, when the guests were gone and the lights were dim and the snow outside turned the world into something quiet and soft, my daughter approached me. Her makeup was smudged a little. Her voice was small. "I'm sorry," she said, real this time. "I was so busy trying to be enough for them. I forgot I was already enough for you." I wanted to say something sharp. The advisor in me could have listed the costs, the emotional interest rates, the late fees, but the grandmother in me, older, wiser, tired of Warrenly, reached out and held her hand. "I didn't freeze the account to punish you," I said quietly. "I froze it to save you. There's a difference." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks like thaw. And I thought of Sam again. I thought of our 10 acres by the creek, the dream we sold. I felt the ache of it still there, still tender, but I also felt something else. Pride. Not the loud kind. The quiet kind that sits in your chest like a steady candle. Now, when Christmas comes, I still hang that broken wing angel on the tree. I still stud oranges with cloves. I still set a place at my table that isn't for anyone who thinks love is a ladder. And sometimes, late at night, I sit alone with the lights off except the glow of the tree, listening to the house breathe, listening to my own heart. I've learned something in my 70s that I wish I'd known in my 30s. Some people don't understand your worth until you stop paying for their comfort. Some children don't hear your voice until you stop whispering. And some families only learn gratitude when the easy money dries up and all that's left is the truth, plain, cold, honest as snow. I loved my daughter enough to fund her dream, but I finally loved myself enough to attach terms to it, because love without respect is not a gift, it's a leak. And at my age, I don't patch leaks with tears anymore. I tighten the valve, I protect the house, and I keep the light on only for the ones who remember where home really is. People think that when the money stops, the story ends. They are wrong. That is when the real story finally finds its voice. The wedding became smaller. Yes, fewer candles, fewer people who only knew how to smile when someone else was paying. But what truly changed wasn't the size of the room. It was the way people looked at one another inside it. The illusion cracked. And once it cracked, it never fully sealed again. The days after Christmas felt colder than the season itself. Not the kind of cold that comes from snow or wind, but the kind that settles in the chest when something sacred has been mishandled. My daughter called me often during that week. Sometimes she cried. Sometimes she was angry. Sometimes she tried to sound casual, as if nothing fundamental had shifted between us. And I stayed quiet. For the first time in my life, my silence wasn't weakness. It was boundary. The hardest moment wasn't the bounced checks or the frantic messages from vendors. I had spent decades watching numbers fall apart and be rebuilt. Money never frightened me. What frightened me was the realization that my daughter had begun to see me as something to be hidden, something inconvenient, something that didn't match the image she was trying to project. On Christmas night, the tree lights blinked softly in my living room, and I sat alone with a cup of tea growing cold in my hands. Outside, snow fell without urgency, covering everything evenly, the way truth eventually does. I pulled one of Sam's old sweaters from the closet and rested it on my lap. It still carried a trace of him, soap, wood, and time. That was the night I spoke to my husband again, after years of silence. "She's afraid of her roots," I whispered, "and I'm afraid she's forgotten where strength comes from." A few days later, the phone rang. It was Liam's mother. Her voice was smooth, carefully warm, the kind of warmth that never quite reaches the core. She spoke as if this were all a misunderstanding. "Families have emotional moments," she said. Surely I understood how these things go. I listened patiently. Then I said, calmly, "This is not emotional. This is contractual." There was a pause, a sharp one. She told me I was putting my daughter in a difficult position, and that was when I understood something with absolute clarity. They were not worried about my daughter. They were worried about their access, about appearances, about leverage. I told her, quietly, my daughter was placed in a difficult position the moment she decided her mother was too embarrassing for Christmas. What you're experiencing now is not difficulty, it's consequence. The call ended shortly after that. My daughter came to my house that evening, not storming this time, not demanding. She looked tired, smaller. Her hair was pulled back carelessly, her confidence worn thin by weeks of pretending she wasn't. Drowning. She sat on the couch and stared at the floor for a long time before speaking. They're angry, she finally said. I asked her who she meant. She swallowed. Liam's parents, his friends, everyone. They're saying I'm unstable, that my family is complicated. And there it was, the fear I had recognized from the very beginning, now fully formed in her eyes. The terror of not being accepted by people who were never going to accept her anyway. I took her hand. You are not unstable, I told her. You are exhausted from trying to perform for people who only love reflections, not reality. She broke then, not the polished cry she'd perfected over the years, but the raw, childlike sob of someone who had finally run out of armor. I didn't want to be small, she said. I wanted to be enough. My voice stayed steady. It had learned how. You were enough when you were 5 and brought me dandelions like they were diamonds. You were enough when you failed your first exam and thought the world had ended. You were enough when you didn't know who you were yet. You didn't become valuable because of who you're marrying. She listened, truly listened, and that mattered. The wedding, when it finally came, was quieter, humble in a way that felt almost foreign to her at first. There were no ice sculptures, no champagne wall, just winter light, soft music, and people who were actually there for love. I sat in the front row, not hidden, not managed, present. And as I watched my daughter speak her vows, I saw something shift in her posture. She stood straighter, not taller but steadier, as if she had finally realized that standing on borrowed approval is far more exhausting than standing alone. When the last invoices were paid, I signed them myself, calmly, methodically. My daughter stood beside me, watching, learning, not because I needed control but because she needed understanding. Later that night, she hugged me without rushing, without checking who was watching. I'm sorry, she whispered. I forgot who you were. I held her and said the truth, softly, the way wisdom is best delivered. I didn't stop the money to punish you. I stopped it to save both of us. Now, when Christmas comes, I still decorate my small tree. I still hang the chipped ornaments and the little angel missing one wing. I still stud oranges with cloves and let the scent fill the room. Some years my daughter joins me. Some years she doesn't, and that's all right, because I have learned. In my 70s, what took me far too long to understand. Love without respect becomes a debt. Silence, when chosen, becomes power. And dignitorial dignity is not something you inherit, or marry into. It is something you claim, the moment you decide that your worth is not negotiable. Was once told I was too simple to be seen at a rich table, but I built the table they were eating at, and when I finally stood up, turned off the tap, and walked away with my keys in hand, I realized something that still makes me smile on quiet winter nights. The most expensive lessons are never paid with money, they are paid with memory, and I made sure that lesson would never be forgotten.